Okay, well, we're recording. Hi, everybody. Um, we're here. We're here to chat. Um, there's not much else to say. I think many people are just kind of familiar with the format at this point. Going to be pretty informal. Uh, we're just here to talk about behavior and animal behavior and uh,
Human behavior,
human
maybe.
behavior
Oh,
here.
that's animal behavior. It's the same thing.
Right. Right. And behavior analysis, applied behavior analysis, operant conditioning in general, aspects of animal behavior related to all things training and welfare. So people can type in questions. I don't know. I try to, as I already had mentioned before the recording, I try to not do as much talking as possible. So I'm gonna let you start this off. Um,
You're a shocker. You're a shocker. When I even when I'm not asked to start these things off, I generally find my brain wandering to what I'm concentrating on and focusing on and doing in my world, training world. What other world is there? At that particular time. And I think when Eddie and I had a chat about what we might sort of focus on, the first thing I think I wrote back was antecedents, because that has been very much something the part of ABA and the application of, well, that is what it is, that I've realized for the initial part of my 30 years of doing this, the initial part of my time as a trainer, I didn't consciously focus on antecedents. And even though I have to, this is like every time I tell this story, I feel like I'm stepping into the confession booth, because I have to say that I was one of the lucky people who did Susan Friedman's Living and Learning with Parrots, or it was Living and Learning with Animals, back in 2000. No, wasn't 2001, was it? Oh my God, yes. Well, it is 2021, Peter. Her first or second one, I can't remember. And she's going on about this ABC bull stuff. And I'm like, oh God, it's too hard. My brain, it's too hard. And, back then it was, functional analysis and that, and it still is functional analysis and how to do it and everything. And I admit, this is me in the confession booth, where I just was like, thanks, Susan, that's nice. Put it on the shelf. Put it on the shelf. And I did not grasp the importance of it, that it was the foundation of everything. And I think that's because I was just so focused on, and I think, and it'd be interesting to hear what other people say, because it's very, like we were just talking about, Eddie and I were just saying, like when we first met virtually, there was no Zoom, like, oh my God, it was the Yahoo groups, and you were lucky if you could see who was on down in the little corner. Someone had a green light next to them, and that's how you knew they were actually there. That was all we had, these couple of groups on Yahoo all writing and stuff, and now everyone is just, we're just flooded in the good sense of the word with so many options for learning, and that brings good and bad to it, right? Oh yeah. Good and bad. But I remember putting it on the shelf, and that these ABCs, and okay, that was, it was one of those situations where it's too hard, it makes my brain hurt. What I'm doing is working, and there's a real lesson here. What I'm doing is working, so I'll just put that on the shelf. And I think every single one of us is aware of contextual, the importance of context. We say, well, if you teach your dog to sit in the kitchen, then you go to obedience training to show off, don't be surprised if he doesn't sit there, because he's learned to sit in the kitchen. But but I guess the enormity of it and the depth, that's the word I want to use, the depth of antecedents and how we can manipulate them to improve the possibility of success, to therefore improve the chance of giving reinforcement, is just phenomenal. So yeah, you know, that was the first thing that jumped into my mind. And definitely, as I've sort of said a number of times in other places, the great thing that I can bring to the general dog world, and it's not just me, there's lots of people who have opportunities to work with other species, but I can bring that teaches you just so much. But the other thing is that amazing opportunities that I've had in film work, on a film set, and in the theatre. Oh my God, Eddie, the stuff you learn about what dogs perceive about antecedents, and we're not just talking about that ABC unit, we're talking about it like half an hour back, because everything's so the same. Everything's the same. And so, you know, when you see your bulldog get up and stretch because over the speaker in your room at the theatre comes the call for the caravan scene, and you've got at least 15-20 minutes before she gets a sausage in her, and all of the things that have to happen before she gets that sausage. Oh my God, that just blew my mind. And so I'm so lucky to have such unique experiences where I think, especially in the theatre world, I get to see it, because everything is so, like, for 2 years, everything was the same leading to that point. And I just could not believe the how far back they would understand, okay, we're going to start to move now, because it's just this enormous behavior chain that I'm unaware of because I'm a stupid human, right?
Right.
And thank God for this stupid human to be put in a situation where it was so clear, so I could see it. But move that to the real world, and we know that they're going back just as far, because we know we're pretty much patterned in our behavior, you know, and we live our lives often in a very I'm going to say linear sense, but you know what I mean. We're very patterned. We get up and we go to work about the same time. We go to sport on Saturdays, da, da, da. They are incredible. And I say to people all the time that that dogs, animals really, that dogs have they come out of the womb with a PhD in applied behavior analysis, right? And we're just playing catch up all the time because they don't have the baggage that we have. So so yeah, that's sort of the topic that sprung to mind, and then we had a few other things that came up.
Yeah, antecedents are always an interesting topic from a behavior analytics standpoint. I think because historically, the field of behaviorism really began with a emphasis on antecedents. So I think for behavior analysts, for operant conditioning, for the Skinnerian approach, the focus is on the consequence end, right? To the extent to where Skinner himself even talked about the free operant, or the what would be described as the two-term contingency. So now we're just talking about behavior consequence. There are many who would argue that you never have behavior in the absence of antecedent stimuli. That you always
give us an example of, because I would be one that would argue that off the top of my head. So give us an example.
Yeah, so there's not a real so when behavior analysts, and we're talking about mostly the experimental work and the early work of what Skinner was doing in the lab with rats and then pigeons, what he was talking about with respect to the free operant mostly really was just the fact that these were not discrete trials. These were not that the pigeon could peck the key as much as it wanted without having to be cued to peck, right? So
right.
every, if this is a fixed ratio of 1 or 5 or whatever schedule of reinforcement that we're talking about, The pigeon just has to peck the key 1 time or 5 times, and then as many times as it can do that, it's getting rewarded for that without a cue. So that's the idea of that. That's what Skinner, and really that was groundbreaking. When Skinner, I mean Skinner himself wrote an article about this history of him developing the operant chamber, um, because it was so different than what was being done within psychology, within behavior, within any experimental work, because everything up until that point was running in a maze, running in a
Yeah,
maze, which are
sure. Yeah.
discrete trials, right? So we have this rat, you have to pick the rat up, put it down, let it run, and then it gets to the end of the maze. Maybe it gets rewarded or it gets to get out of the maze. There are different ways that this is run, but either way, we're talking about a T maze. Then you have to pick the rat up, bring it back, put it back. So that is all, there's a start point, there's an end point. And suddenly, with the advent of the operant chamber, we now have this pigeon that can just, the rat can just press a lever, the pigeon can just peck a key over and over and over again. And that was really an important
Right.
component to. So but historically, and I'm just going to mention this too, there was already, so that point of, I mean, all of respondent conditioning going back to the late 19th century, and it didn't really start traveling out of Russia until the early 20th century. But nonetheless, we're talking about Pavlovian conditioning going back to early 19th century, and then or sorry, late 19th century. um, so we have, this focuses on antecedents. These are stimulus pairings. That's all of what people think of
Sure.
as Pavlovian respondent conditioning, classical conditioning,
Yeah.
is all antecedent at that level. And we often forget that component in operants. Now, I should say at the antecedent level, we can go beyond just 3 terms as well, beyond 3 term
Yeah.
contingencies. So we can go to the 4 term contingency, and now we can talk about setting events or establishing or motivating operations as well, which is a lot of what you're alluding to in some of the film work and the TV work that you do, where you have all these different conditions that really um, set up, not just the discriminative stimuli that you're dealing with, but
Yeah.
the stuff that allows reinforcers to work or not work to begin with is important,
Sure, sure, sure.
right? So
Okay, great.
this is all on that antecedent. And then another part of this antecedent end that is often, so I think it's I wanted to provide a little bit of history there because it's an important part to remember that before, before the 20s, and then in the 30s, Skinner wrote The Behavior of Organisms in 38. And then really, he was back at Harvard in the late 40s. He was at Minnesota and Indiana between then. So this is when he wrote Science and Human Behavior in 51. And that's where you really start in the 40s and 50s. You start seeing operant conditioning taking off. But in that early part of the 20th century, everything going up until really the 40s, 50s was all on the antecedent end. Uh, other
Man,
other than
man,
Yeah, so
didn't realize that.
almost half a century of behaviorism is and it is almost strictly antecedent. Aside from Edward Thorndike's work, aside from law of effect, and then some other things that behaviorists said, they were really talking about this at the antecedent end. So they were talking about um, the stimulus pairings, and another component of that I like to point out is that half of respondent conditioning is not about the conditioning itself, but the stuff that allows conditioning to occur. So that's the unconditioned or unconditional stimuli, right?
Sure,
Which
sure. Okay. Yeah, of
which
course.
is the
Yep,
stuff
yep,
you've got.
yep.
This is so when people like Bob Bailey like to say, Pavlov is on your shoulder. Remember that Pavlov's
Yeah.
all. It's not just the antecedent conditioning that is happening while you're doing the operant stuff. but it's also the stuff that allows the respondent conditioning to occur, which is what the animal came to the table with, right? It's evolutionary history. This is all important.
Yeah,
So
that is so cool. That is
it's
so cool. Okay,
there's
we can go now because that I need the day to think about that now.
there's so much weird stuff in antecedent stuff that we have to be, and there's a lot of it that sometimes we mix up. And I like to point this out too, because there's a lot of stuff that we just assume the reward is the most important component of the contingency involved. So I'll give you an idea. This is the stuff that I love to say, and then I want to shut up because I want to allow people to ask questions, and I want to allow you to keep talking. But I know, sorry, Lisa.
Yeah, it's only 8 yeah.
We're getting.
I hear
So
you, Lace. I hear you. I hear you.
I'm going to give you a great example of where the stuff, where the on the antecedent end, and where the conditioning that's occurring and not occurring, and how easy it is to get confused, and the contingencies can be. So it's in the zoo world, and of course you all are there's a lot of stuff happening in dog training. I'm sure everybody here that is doing some training is doing some level of this, but there's what's called targeting, right? Or target training, right? Of course I have to bring out my models, and of course I have a penguin. So in fact, I have 2 penguins. They're always on my table. You know what? For this example, we're going to bring out the polar bear, because I mean, sometimes people often forget, like people associate, they're always like, oh yeah, that's the penguin guy. And I'm like, I've done as much research with bears, but bears are wonderful. So let's say we're target training this polar bear. Okay. Which terrifying animal, right? But we have this target that this is happening through something like a protected contact. We're not going in the cage with the polar bear. Let's be clear about that. But so we present the target, polar bear makes contact with the target, reward, deliver that consequence, deliver the reinforcer, give it a bit of treat, maybe spray out of a bottle, and then keep doing that. Right? So present target, contact target. So we would talk about that if we're talking about that 3-term contingency, like you mentioned, the ABC here, we have the antecedent condition here, right? We're presenting this target. We have the response of contacting the target, and then we have the consequence of being rewarded for contacting the target. And so we assume that's straight operant conditioning. We just assume, right? That's as basic as it gets, right? Oh yeah. The polar bear is contacting the target because it's being rewarded to contact the target, right? Well, turns out that is the exact same setup that happens under auto shaping procedures. So sign tracking procedures, there is a stimulus pairing that is occurring there, much like a respondent conditioning procedure, in that when the target itself is being presented and paired with food. So regardless of whether you require this response or not,
I see what you're saying. I get it.
Right. So this is paired with food, and if that response, if we're getting a same response to food, an appetitive response, we're getting moved to the target, often even contact the target. And
so true. Oh my God.
We get this with key pecking in the lab with pigeons. So Brown and Jenkins in '68 were the first people to show this effect, where what they did was they took pigeons, and all they did was light the key up in the operant chamber, and then have food follow it, right? So we're talking it's a straight respondent conditioning pairing, no pecking required by the pigeon. That it's key lights up, food, key lights up, food, key lights up, food, and the pigeons start pecking. And
of course,
but the assumption was that this was an as it was often described, It was an arbitrary response. And the reason the pigeon was pecking the key was because it was being rewarded to peck the key. And also the idea that behavior analysts were claiming at that time was that we can separate the difference between respondent and operant conditioning in terms of involuntary and voluntary behavior, right? So this is the idea you hear all the time, is that, oh yeah, when you do respondent conditioning, it's salivating, it's eye blinking, it's involuntary behavior, but operant is all voluntary. The animal chooses to, chooses whatever that ultimately means
That means,
from a behavioral standpoint, but the animal chooses to engage in lever pressing or key pecking. So now Braun and Jenkins throw a wrench in this, and immediately the response is, oh no, but you can't separate the operant and respondent contingency there. So it's Williams and Williams that the year after, in 69, publish a paper that then shows, oh, okay, so you think it still might be operant because there's still a consequence involved. Fine. What we'll do is we'll actually put a response cost contingency on the key pecking. So every time the pigeon comes up and pecks the key, delays the reward coming. So now it's being negatively punished for pecking the key, which if that's operant behavior should just go away.
Oh.
And the pigeons still peck, and the pigeons can't stop pecking. So turns out the most important component there in that supposed operant contingency is the respondent contingency. As simply, it's an oversimplification, but
that's all we can deal with right now in Australia. That's all we can deal with. That's enough, Eddie, enough.
It's an important contingency, and when you think about what's happening in target training, and I point this out to trainers, especially zookeepers that are doing this training, where they're putting all this emphasis on the reward, and I said, I like to say, there's a lot of that you're probably going to get these contacts, this approaching. It's not to say the operant components aren't important, because they absolutely are there, especially for shaping the form of the response. But
this is so cool. This is so cool, like extra cool, because so often I think we go along, we being, here we are with our dogs or our polar bears or whatever it is, without the depth of, I'm going to say it like this way, without the ability, because I've got access to the papers and I've got access to the books and blah, 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 but disseminating that information is a learned behavior in and of itself, right? So yeah. you get a situation where, well, at least for me, I just have been chosen to, whatever that means, towards the practical application of it over the theoretical dissemination of it. So often I think there's heaps of people out there who would be nodding their heads because it's what we know, but then just to have someone like you go, here's exactly what's happening, or not exactly, because it's an oversimplification. Thank you very much. I know, I saw you like shit. I saw you go, oh, don't say that. It's not exactly. Like, I forgot I was talking to an academic. But I'm just gonna take. So I know that there's other people out there going, I knew that, but I didn't know that. That kind of stuff. And I think that's so often what happens when you're invested in the training with an understanding of the science in the direction of positive reinforcement, and then so you see these things happen. And because I say to people all the time, I'm good at what I do because I've been doing it for a while, but also because I trust the science. So there's times where I go along and I'm like, I don't know why I'm doing this, but I know it's going to work. So let's just let it work. And then you see the flow-on effect of the behavior. And I said to Susan once, and I make fun of it in my if I'm doing workshops and I'm training something or helping someone live, because I'll often, they present with a problem, or I want to train this or whatever it is, and I'll just need time and it looks like I'm thinking, but I'm not thinking at all. And I say to people, because if I try and think about it, I can't get there. And I say to people, I make a joke and I say, I'm just waiting for my spirit guides to let me know how to approach this. But Susan said to me, it's your latent learning. It's that experience compounded that you're waiting. And that's exactly right. And sometimes you need to get in with the animal to have it happen, because that's the antecedent, I guess, that starts to bring that out. I don't know, I might be saying it all really wrong, but it's so cool that we're really talking about this now, because the other thing that I'm doing, which some people know, is I've got this boxer puppy who's driving me crazy because he's still got puppy teeth, but I'm going to pull them out this afternoon, so we should be cool, but he's allowed to stay. But I've been really focusing on scent work with him, because I've fallen in love with that. The last 10 years have been, oh my God, let's now train an animal to, specifically to alert to a stimulus that you can't perceive. What else could be harder?
Right. It's crazy.
Let's teach you about this now. You think you know dog body language, Clark? Here, do scent work. Oh, shoot. I very much pulled apart the hunting, and that's all games and food and stuff and all that, and then just working on different aspects of the alert behavior. And I'm just using a lid, so it very much sense for it now. But I said, okay, well, let's just teach him to find this lid, and he can see it, but I need to be able to perceive it too, because I want nose to source, and all of this stuff that I just can't do if I can't perceive the very, the discriminative stimulus. That's the important thing. It's just, and so I've been playing around with it and tossing in food and all sorts of stuff, but and I've always sort of understood that the old thing, animals orientate towards the point of reinforcement. So I get that, so even if I know that, even if I don't ask him for nose on source or a particular operant behavior, then he's just going to orientate towards that and stay there and all that kind of stuff. But the fun stuff started when I got a bit cocky, and I was like, okay, I want, I'm thinking classical conditioning, even though now you bastards tell us there's no such thing as really classical conditioning and it's all one big opera on whatever, blah, 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 that's going on. Does my head in. And he likes the hose, squirts, like, oh yeah, where is it? So out I go with my lid out the back, and the first little session, like 5 squirts, like he finds it and I go squirt, and he goes, you've got to be joking. I expected food, but this is just like 2 thumbs up awesome. And I did that a couple of times. In the second little session I did, so now the context speaks, right? He's like, oh my God, this is where I don't get the food, but I can predict that the water's going to come. Now, what does he do with the water? Right? Like mouthy. Right. So he comes in and he does this beautiful like freeze target, and I squirt him sort of just between him and the lid, right? And I go, I'm so freaking awesome. And the next thing, and then I stop. I can actually move him away with this reinforcer to start again, So he's just coming back in, comes in, grabs hold of that lid, off he trots with it, parading around the backyard, because that whole thing of this is what I understood. I'm now this thing is going to predict something that my arousal goes right up. And it's really, I mouth at it. And that was just like 3 or 4, 5 reps after, probably 50, 60 reps of the food. And I was getting this nice freeze. So now I've screwed it right up for myself, haven't I? Because now I don't want him to pick up the target and carry it away. But anyway, I can fix that. I'm a professional. But the other thing is that's so cool, because it's unfortunate. It's an unfortunate trait that I have, that I just sort of think to myself, well, let's just see what happens here. let's just see. So don't worry about your training goals. Let's just see what happens here, right?
Right.
So he picks it up and he does a parade around with it, tail up, happy as a pig in shit, and then he brings it back, puts it down, and waits again, like right in that area of the yard where we've been doing it. And I just and he did that like 3 or 4 times, and I'm like, I love this stuff so much. I love this stuff. And I guess what it comes to is, what I'm saying is, I know that there's something at play there. I might not know exactly what's going on like you do, but all I need is the animal's behavior. That's all I need. I need a trust in the science, and I need the animal's behavior. And from what I'm understanding of your saying, that's and I kind of thought what happened might happen based on what I know, like the little bit that I know, but just to see it play out and over and over again, it floors me, it excites me, it just is so amazing to me that we can have such that even me with such a little understanding of ABA can have such an ability to predict what's going to happen. So if I was a betting girl, I would have put $50 on, I think he's going to bring it back and put it down, because that's what starts the game, blah, blah, blah. So it was so cool.
It's what, there's, I don't do a lot of training these days, with having started so much of my even academic career focused on training animals directly. And really for the past decade plus, I have really done, I don't get to train as much as I like to. I'm so used to living between two worlds of this, of like the science end of it and the practice end of it. And I always find, no matter how much bridging between those two worlds occur, I always feel like it's just way too big of a gap. I'm always looking for a way to, how do I get trainers to think a little bit more like scientists, and scientists to think a little bit more like trainers? I'm always, both of those are equally important. And the one thing I know that I find really appealing in both worlds, and this is absolutely, and I try to remind myself, I try to humble myself as much as possible to this extent, is that in both the science and the training world, that the people that go, well, I kind of figured out a little bit, but I don't really know what's that much of what's going on. Like when I see that, I go, all right, we can get along, like we're gonna be able to do some cool stuff together. It's what I get wary of when I see it is the people that go, well, this is this and this is that, or the people that want to just, right? So if it's the trainer that says, well, I've been doing this 20 years and this is what's happening, and I know this is what's happening, or it's a scientist who says, no, there's nothing, even with that set of that set of stuff going on with auto shaping and sign tracking and the mixture of respondent and operant conditioning, there are so many components of that we don't know. And that's the part that I try to remind, like with behavior analysts, I'm going, there's stuff happening other than the operant. There's stuff happening other than operant conditioning. And just because the behavior can be operant doesn't mean it always is, or that's even the main, we need to remember there's an organism there. We need to remember there's antecedent stimuli that are not conditioned just from an operant standpoint, that there's so much
available to us, right? Like, I mean, I don't know if this is correct, but I when we get into the area of speaking about emotions and all that, whatever, but we know that there's internal processes going on that will affect the outcome that we see at any given point in time, regardless of anything else. So I just for ease of helping people understand and not even understand, but remember to always take into account those A's. That yes, they're there, and we can talk about it, but we need a beer. That's called an alcoholic discussion, where you just drink yourself into understanding. Have you ever done that? That's great. Yeah. You drink yourself into understanding. You have no idea what's happening, and then you go to bed like an expert. Then you wake up none the wiser. But it's that whole I guess that whole thing for me of yes, that I trust the science implicitly, because that's all I've really got in terms of the information that you guys give us in terms of how behavior is working in the real world, the knowledge of the fact that there are always other components going on. I acknowledge that, I take them into account, medical model, I need to know all that kind of stuff. The animal's healthy, fit, out of pain, blah, blah, blah. But right there, right now, all I have is what is going on, the behavior, first and foremost, what I'm seeing, how it's moving, and the ability to influence with those antecedents and consequences.
Yeah.
But it is really interesting, and I think that I'm just going back to your desire to pull both worlds together more. And definitely, I guess you would agree with me, in the past 20, 30 years that we've been doing this, we've seen that more and more and more. But I also see how do I say this? The opportunity for people who want to be trainers to, that's wrong. I'm basically saying like that you can go and spend your money, you can get your little piece of paper, and then your learning begins, kind of thing. And I think sometimes that whole setup brings us into this false sense of understanding that we know it all now, and we know enough to go and be very effective as agents of behavior change. And I feel that probably the last 5 years I'm effective. It doesn't mean I haven't done good work, and it doesn't mean I haven't helped, but I try and help people understand that the only way that you get good is by doing it. And as I said before, I think it's one of the reasons that I have developed such an ability and to think quick about this, and to be able to change behavior nice and quickly, so that it looks like I've got spirit angels telling me what to do, is because I just always, I always err on, well, what if? Well, let me just see what happens here.
Yeah.
And that can sometimes be to the detriment of my training program, because I want to, because it might mean that I then have to retrain something or whatever. But the goal, the value of that learning is so much more than if I followed my plan. And I guess what I'm saying to everybody out there is the best thing that we can do is to go that way. Like, so many of us are scared. So many of us want a plan. How did you train that? And in absence of step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, or even just a very basic view of, because we all know that each dog is different, blah, blah, blah. We freeze with fear that we're going to do something wrong. And it's like, you can't, like, your dog might get fat. Okay, don't train tomorrow. Like, it's that whole, I want people to play with it more, rather than just have it as a process that gets them to a goal behavior.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Right. No. Yeah. Just working on, just training for the sake of training at some level. And that's
training for the sake of your behavior change. That's the
right,
thing we so
right,
forget. We
right.
so forget that we're learning too. And, we get our piece of paper, or we decide that we want to train our dogs, and always the focus is on training the dog, and the dog will respond to this antecedent, and this is the, your rate of reinforcement here. And we've got to turn that around and focus on us. But then again, it's oftentimes when we do that, it oftentimes is how do I say this? I guess one of the things that I do so much is I train informally. I go in off, sometimes without a goal, sometimes with a goal. I'm focusing on myself, but I'm not, here's what I'll say. I'm not married to the outcome. And that's because we're so goal orientated,
Right.
I'm doing this because because just fucking do it. Oh, sorry, I said it. Just do it. Just get out there and do it. And see what happens. And everybody's going to hate this. Video it and watch it, because
no, absolutely. That's that latter point. By the way, I would fucking appreciate it if you stopped saying fuck. But other than that, so I like to say there these I know people I think sometimes are surprised when they hear me curse. And because I pretend to sound perfect. Anybody who knows me off of doing a chat or any of presentation or something like that knows that I curse pretty much every other word. And
can I just hit pause and tell you one of my favorite stories about cursing, because it's actually animal training related, because and it actually fits in really well here, because I was doing something, I can't remember, it was something really precise, and that's right, it was it's happened a couple of times, so I don't know why it's so important that I pick the right thing when it actually first occurred. But I was doing something like I had to teach one of the dogs to put their ears back, like sit and look forward. And I couldn't, it was for a film job, and I couldn't be in front of them. I had to teach them to like look at something and go, oh God, like this. And anyway, and so I had my clicker out, and I'm trying to, just click the ear movement stuff. And it was just one of those bad days where my timing was all out, and so I'm like, sorry everybody, I'm like, click fuck, because I got it wrong, and my rule is to pay, that whole thing, click fuck.
right,
I did,
right.
And then and I'm videoing it, I'm being the best trainer that I can ever be, get on with that session. I watch it back, and I realized that when I say fuck, my dogs look to me expecting reinforcement. So I've got this wonderful conditioned reinforcer, and it's like, and if I hadn't videoed that, I wouldn't have known, but they are so quick. And it's like, oh, Peta Clarke, oh my gosh, that's just amazing. Reminds me of the time. Sorry. Now I've got another story. We're teaching a macaw to like continue to fly until we called it down, and it was going beautifully. And we hadn't put it in shows yet, but we have the Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras out here it's February or January. I can't remember when, it sort of changes around a bit. But when I was at the zoo, we always used to do a show. They used to come in their costumes and drag. I think the day afternoon before, they went and did their parade. And I was doing the show, and I said, do you reckon let's just put Arcadia in, and let's just, God knows what she'll do, but it's just, she's so beautiful. Everybody's out there with their paraphernalia and looking amazing. So a macaw flying around, because we've got drab parrots out here, bloody white and black. Australia, what are you thinking? Anyway, so she does that, and she comes out at the end, and I'm waxing lyrical about the environment and all of that stuff, and she comes out from the high tower and she flies around, and she comes a bit lower than she normally does, and she's flying around me, and I see her eyes pinning pinning, and I'm thinking, oh my God, she starts to scream, which she normally wouldn't, that excited macaw thing that happens. And
Right.
and I'm like, oh my God, there's men with feather boas coming out. Like, she just must be like, oh my God. And she's just flying around. And when when we were training her and I'd call her down, just put my hand out, that was the antecedent. That was the cue. I think we call it a discriminative stimulus. We're supposed to be being professional. And she'd come down, and then she would just fly off. Like, she'd just like have a go, like, yes, having a great game. And I'd go, oh shit, no, shithead. Oh yeah, shithead, like this. So next thing, in this gay and lesbian Mardi Gras, here's this bloody bird flying around. Shithead, shithead, shithead. It's like, oh God, I love it so much. I love it so much. And the crowd went wild.
I gotta ask, because this is something. So for people that don't know, I am still not. I'm still not in Australia. I've had the damn job for well over a year, since December of 2019. When the offer came down. The contract was signed in March of 2020, and I am still not in Australia because of this pandemic. So everyone, put your damn face masks on. Don't assume because you got vaccinated, we all are in the clear. Because if for no other reason, we're trying to get me over to the damn vet school at Adelaide so I can start my senior faculty position there. But that said, so I'm still here in the States. But one thing I do have to ask, I have never worked with a marsupial. I have never done. So I'll tell you, my two go-tos of the animals I desperately want to do some training with, and I have no idea how it's going to go, are wombat.
I knew you'd say wombat. I knew you would say wombat.
I have loved wombats since I don't even know how old. Probably
they're
4.
awesome.
Yeah, I love and all the variations of the different wombat, because that's the other thing a lot of people don't realize, how different the wombats even look based on their region where they're, so that the ones you get out in Brisbane are there's different looking wombats too. But so, and the other one is quokka. So I really want.
All right, of course you want to quokka. Yeah, I haven't done anything with a. Oh yes, I have in Perth, but we didn't do much work with them. Wombats are so cool. They are just so freaking cool. So we can work that out. That's no problem. They're my favorite too. Have you read a book called The Secret Life of Wombats?
No.
Okay, you are going.
That's gonna be on. That's on my list now.
It's a great one. It's a great one. And like it's one of those things, isn't it? That getting back to what we're supposed to be talking about, that we do have this amazing system of that controls behavior change, if that's the right word, and learning and on this planet. But then we do have, and that's the same whether it's a wombat or a dog or an Eddie or a Peter or whatever. And then we've got this amazing variety of opportunities to see that in play. Pocket loves eating wombat poo. Yeah.
I know. I'm reading some of the. I sorry, I was getting distracted by the chats there for a second, and there was mention of drop bears already. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt with the laughter.
No. It was. I was just trying to get us back on track, and just saying that like here we are with this amazing technology, whatever you want to call it, natural, biological process called learning, and we know, that if you came out here tomorrow, landed, and I took you straight to the zoo and I said, train this wombat, you would have after you got over your giddiness, you would have a great ability to manipulate and to get behavior change quickly. all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
But
maybe.
the
I don't know. My training is really rusty these days.
don't worry, we'll help you. But that's the thing again. Oh, sorry, that's another thing. But we have this variability, and that is another thing. It's a different thing that I was thinking of, but we've got this opportunity to develop up an understanding and a trust in a process, right? And it's a process that's like an iceberg, and pretty in the sense that you can pretty much only ever know the tip, and it's when you dip under that you just go, oh my God, there's so much more, all that kind of stuff. But really, you get good at your mechanical skills and all that kind of stuff. But then we do have this opportunity to say, okay, now put this into practice with this species and that species. And even though you've got the constant of this most amazing process, and you could go in and do your wombat, no matter what you say, you could, you'd fumble through with your rustiness and it'd come back real quick, just like, and so the opportunity to learn about that process via, as so many of us have done now with Terry Ryan, with the chicken training, many dog trainers have trained goldfish now, stuff like that. And that's what excites me so much, because the learning that I just had the opportunity to do with those animals that you couldn't be in with, or that could kill you. So you wanted to have that bloody good rapport, and you worked hard at rapport even before you did anything else, as opposed to these dogs that come in with a waggy tail for the most part and love you whether your timing's great or not. It's just a phenomenal opportunities that we have. So it's sort of another way that I'm sort of realizing, yes, get out there and train for yourself. How good is my timing? How I'm going to try. I could train this behavior, so I could train the nose over, the whatever you call it, shame or who farted or whatever, that behavior,
right.
over the nose. You could train that by sticking a bit of sticky tape on and shit and capturing it, and that would probably get the behavior, as long as the dog's comfortable with it, quick and relatively easily. But you can also shape it and really annoy yourself, but let's just see how your skill set is. And my skill set, since I've been working with this puppy, and I had an 8-week, we're just up to the last week group, where I basically said, I'm going to show you as much of the training of this dog, like for real, as I can, just in the area of scent work, which made me train, which made me really video my sessions, just because I needed to edit bits and pieces. It may be, and put in a little arrow where the lid was and stuff. And I was committed to doing that. My training skills have improved, I would say like 80-90%. Just because of these 8 weeks. And that's someone who does it all the time and thinks it all the time. But like you, there's often times where I don't do it for a while because I don't need to, or I just go, oh gosh, busy doing other things or whatever. So again, it's that whole thing for me of, you talk about antecedents, right? And what's the most, oh God, I'm so careful of what I say now, because it's you and you'll go, yeah, kind of, Peter, but it doesn't really matter. I was going to say, what's the most important antecedent in the animal's environment when they're training? The bloody trainer. Hello. Right.
No, I mean, yeah, you're a big part of the environment.
What's my, the animal comes in and especially when you get this at the zoo, right, where an animal would come in, and because you've got often a number of people who are working with that animal, unless they're working with something specific, you might have 3 or 4, maybe 5, maybe everybody works this animal just to station it. And that you will get different behavioral responses, maybe slight, maybe huge, depending on their history with that particular trainer. In this antecedent set, I expect this, and that's just, we forget so much of that because we're so focused on the animal. So
Yeah, no,
Anyway,
it's important. The zoo stuff is always really, really wild because of how quickly you are transitioning between, it's easy. I think for many most applied behavior analysts are only working with humans, and we're talking about they're doing that's the majority of applied behavior analysis. The vast majority, like 99% of it, is work with humans, and then the majority of trainers are working with one species, right? And it becomes
yeah,
so
yeah,
easy to forget how much of
yeah,
the species itself is relevant when you're not switching between species.
yeah. Oh
So
yeah, oh
when
yeah,
you
yeah,
go
yeah, yeah.
from yeah, when you go from a porcupine to a goat to a bear, it becomes
Oh,
worlds different. Just even what you're looking for in that
yeah.
in the typical behavior of the animal, how they're
Handling of
going to respond.
reinforcement, right? Like,
Yeah,
I remember
yeah,
when I went from birds and I was the most incredible deliverer of sunflower seeds that you've ever seen, bang, bang, bang.
right,
And
right,
and then I went to marine mammals, and it was an incredible experience because here I now have this 300-kilogram seal by my side. I don't know the individual, I don't know the species. I've read about them in books, I've done my research, I've
right.
done my homework, but I've never had, what does that mean? What does that mean? Is that a precursor to aggression? Should I run?
Oh,
Can I outrun this
yeah,
thing?
yeah, yeah.
All of that. And I remember just doing basic like targeting, and hand target. And I remember I've got my whistle there, and I've got my pouch full of squid and fish and all of that stuff. And I was so out of my depth. And this is, how long had I been training by that stage? 10 years at least, and nerdy training.
Right.
And I go, and I'm so out of it that I'm feeding a squid and blowing the whistle. Like, I'm totally and utterly, my bridge is coming after. and
Right.
and the girl who had no idea my experience had said, now, one of the really good things is to give your bridge before you give the primary reinforcer.
Right.
And it was the greatest thing in my world, right? To go, oh yeah, I know, I kind of know that, but again, anyone who's out there training, it's so easy, like you say, when you get used to training a dog or a particular breed, as so many people get into, which is fine. But yeah, you get really good at training that animal. Doesn't mean you're a really good trainer, or doesn't mean you're the best trainer you can be. And so when you
Yep,
go and
yep.
you do a consult with a dog that's completely different to you, you're not going to be able to be the best that you can be, because you're so set in training the Great Dane, and now there's a Chihuahua, and you don't need to go and get a Chihuahua, but yeah, just that whole exposure to other, we need to have a workshop out here. When we get you out here, we'll have a wombat, we'll get one of those. And we all need to, like, all of us pro trainers need to come together with a dog that's comfortable to work with someone else, and we need to swap, and we need to just see everything go
Yeah,
to shit,
yeah.
right? Just like that.
Absolutely.
It's
Uh,
it's one of my favorite things.
it's crazy. The thing is, and that's why I often walk into situations now, and I just tell people how much I don't know about the animal they're about to, because about the animal they're about to introduce me to.
Yeah.
That I'm like, oh, I've never worked with that before, or I've never trained that animal. I've never done that. Or I haven't trained in 10 plus years. I find these caveats I give like right off the bat, because my experience has been that people tend to treat me like they assume just because. So I have a couple really wild examples of this, but they assume that I'm just oh no, he's an expert. He's an expert in behavior analysis. He's an expert in that. He works with walruses. He works with hippos. He knows what he's doing. And it's like, I've never been in this enclosure with this animal before. Like I manage students collecting data on that species. That's the extent of my. So I'll give you an example of this. I had this happen with New York Aquarium, which is a fantastic facility. I had been doing research with walruses for, I don't know, at that time, a couple years, a few years. And I'm one of the few people who had been doing any work with walruses in general. I mean, we're talking at that time, I don't know how many there are now, but at that time there were 26 walruses in captivity in all of North America. There were, I think, less than 50 around the world. So that tells you how many. There's very limited number of people that have even directly worked with walruses, right? So it's and I'm doing research with them, which is even less. But I've never, my interactions with walruses are pretty limited. I'm on another side, outside of this exhibit. So I go and visit this aquarium, and the thing is, I'm treated as a walrus expert. And so they just take me immediately behind the scenes, and this is a line of trainers, of keepers at the New York Aquarium. They're about to lead me onto the platform. So free contact with the walruses, and they have this big male there. And
Mm.
I've had very little. I think that was actually my first free contact situation with the walrus. Situation, probably the appropriate word there. And as I'm about to walk over the threshold of going onto onto the platform, the trainer in front of me turns around and says, "Oh," and I don't remember the male's name. She says, "The male doesn't like men." That's the last thing that enters my brain as I'm being brought onto a free contact platform with a 3,000 plus pound male adult male walrus. And the very first, and I already don't know this. I don't know what I'm supposed to do in interactions. This is, I think, my first free contact situation with a walrus interaction. I've been observing them. I don't know what they do to people, like how they, what's a proper interaction. And this thing just comes up, hauls up to the end of the platform,
Oh,
still in the water, gets as tall as he can, doesn't even come down, and just does the eye, just turns around, does it, because they have those funny
oh
gray
yeah.
eyes, just goes like that to me from, and I'm a short guy as is, but this thing is still like Shaquille O'Neal to me, looking down. And and immediately I go, I don't know what the proper response is here. I actually don't know. Like if I've had free contact with tigers at that point. I mean, I had a lot of dangerous free contact with Asian and African elephants, number of animals that, maybe not the best animals to have free contact with, but nonetheless. So when I say free contact, by the way, this is worth pointing out, I've been saying this term a lot, that it is typically known as, there's no barrier. You are just there,
Your
right?
your dinner. If they want dinner, your
Yeah,
dinner.
right, right. And one of the first facilities I worked with was with big cats. So I had free contact with a number of, with 300 plus pound Bengal tigers. Um, this is not not an accredited, or I mean, this is very much Tiger King-esque. So this is in, when I started as a graduate student, and I didn't work with that facility very long, by the way. But so one of the very first exotic animal facilities that shortly after we created Orca, that I had Orca start working with. Um,
Right.
so, but I had no idea what to do in response to this walrus, and I froze, and I went, okay, I have to, I have to make a split decision. There is it, my brain always goes primate or felid. That's what my brain does. So,
Mm.
and by that, what I mean is, so primate or felid, meaning, do you treat this the way you would treat a chimpanzee or a tiger? If it's a chimpanzee, don't make eye contact, lower your shoulders, or you're going to lose some parts potentially, right? So some ends of your fingers, maybe the tips of your ears, maybe some genitalia. That's happened. I'm not kidding. That has happened. Not to me, fortunately. But I'm intact. But it is there. There's been a few really terrible situations with
Man.
that shouldn't have been in situations that they were in, people with them. And then the response to tigers, to felids, is the opposite. You don't take your eyes off of them. You may, like you are there. You want to be as big as you possibly can. You want to seem like you are a struggle to eat. And I'm saying these things as somebody who, we're talking about all these things where we don't say things very definitively within academia as a scientist. I'm saying these things pretty damn definitively. Like, no, that's how
Yeah.
we can
Yeah.
talk about questions, certainly, but I will tell you, I mean, when your life is on the line, there's not a lot to move around with, right? So I'm sitting there in my brain thinking, what's the proper response to a walrus? Now, I mean, I trusted the keepers, I trusted the trainers. They knew what they were doing. I think, I don't think my life was in danger at any moment, but nonetheless, when you were suddenly thrust into that situation, you surely feel, and I decided my response was primate, not felid. Primate, not big cat, not felid. Um, so I went, okay, look
Yeah.
down at the ground, drop shoulders, and you know, maybe look. This is we're gonna make me look less threatening. And the walrus just kind of what felt like an eternity was staring there at me, and then finally just hauled up and flipped over. Presented his belly to me like, okay, you're my friend. We
You're
can you come over here, and we're presented with those kind of situations all the time. And when you have to be with new species, this becomes extremely relevant. Know what you're doing, who you're working with, a species you're about to work with, because you're going to learn all kinds of new stuff that may not be stuff you necessarily wanted to learn, especially when you're put in these
yeah. And
new
and
situations
and
with
you, and
individual species.
that point that you made there about I trusted the keepers, that's all you got,
Yeah.
and there's situations I've been in where where I won't go in because predominantly it's the keepers or the trainers that I don't trust, or I don't know enough about
That
them
you don't
whether to
know. Right.
trust.
Right.
Yeah, that's probably the better point. Because when I mean, especially us, we don't have the opportunity. I remember when I lived in Florida, and it would be like, there goes a big cat in the back of the ute. Right. Okay.
Right.
Like we don't have tigers in backs of utes here. Just saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and
Nor
so we
should
don't have. Yeah, nor should you. Good,
right.
well to point out. So we don't
Yeah.
have the opportunity. So when someone like me gets the opportunity to be in that kind of situation and interact, whatever that means, or just it's not even interact, is it? But just be in that presence. There's such a different experience when you've got a bar between you as to when you haven't.
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking about the your nervous system's response. I'm talking about just that feeling of the presence, like, holy crap, like it is an incredible thing. But I have many times said, I'm fine out here, just because I didn't know. And my experience, I'm fine out here. And
Yeah.
because my experience in the zoo world is that there's a lot of um, maybe not now, but definitely when I was there was very much a process of handing over the feed bucket and the clicker or the whistle without any real, oh yeah, you just click this and you just throw a bit of fish, you'll be right. And
Right.
I know enough to know that you probably will be right, but also you might not. And that risk cost analysis just is a little bit too high for me. Where I've really wanted to go in because I am a primate and I want to go in and,
I
all
want
of
to,
that kind of stuff.
I always want to be, I mean, even to this day, I tend to be a lot more cautious. The older I've gotten, I tend to be more cautious. But even to this day, every time I'm around a new animal, any animal, I turn into, I mean, my motivation 90% of the time is I turn into my 8-year-old self, my 10-year-old self. I want to be around the big, dangerous, might kill me animal and just get to play with it. And it's why that, you know, that's I just want to go in there and start playing with this animal. And it's you know, not fortunately, I think there's a lot more the accredited facilities have done a lot of wonderful work
Right.
in
Yeah, they have.
increasing safety and protected I mean, almost everything everywhere at any accredited facility um, across the world now for elephants is almost everyone has gone completely protected contact for everybody with elephants, which I think should be the case. I don't know that there is a good argument for having free contact with Asian or African elephants. Um, but you know, I'm not involved in the details of that discussion to any great degree,
Yeah,
so I
yeah.
don't have a lot of strong feelings there. But I think it is a good general move. Um,
Yes,
so
could be.
yeah.
Could be.
Now that all of that said, I was going to say one of my last when we were still traveling pre-pandemic. So when I was in Germany for and then the Netherlands for a couple workshops in 2019, um, I went to the Frankfurt Zoo. They took me to the Frankfurt Zoo, and they had eyes, which if any,
Oh,
yeah, the prosimians, the nocturnal primates. So they're prosimians. They're the
oh my
long.
God.
If you've never, for people listening, for
Oh
people,
my
yeah,
God. Yeah, go look it up. They're incredible.
yeah, giant eyes, nocturnal primate. Very,
In-
I mean, they're prosimians, so similar to the lemurs. Although not, I'm
They're
more.
they're alien-esque, aren't they? I just remember their little hands, if that's what you call them.
They have the long finger they use to tap on and find insects
That's
at
right.
night,
Oh,
and they're wild. And I'd never even seen one live before. And I immediately, you know, I said that to the keepers. I said, I've never even seen an ii in captivity. And they just got excited by that. So sometimes this doesn't work to my benefit, by the way, by telling people how much I don't know about things. So they it worked to my benefit because this is what I wanted really ultimately. But they said, oh, well, we're gonna set something up for you special today. And they took me into the exhibit with the eyes. Now they are wonderful animal, like I
from
said.
walrus to eye, Eddie's
They are
world.
they
Right?
are they are wonderful animals. They are very passive. They're not very fast moving animals. They're moderate. I mean, they're faster than some of the lorises or things like that. But they're one. I had just, you know, all I'd ever done with eyes is read about them. Or watch stuff with them.
Yeah,
I'd
yeah, yeah.
never seen one in captivity, and now I'm seeing one for the first time, and I'm seeing one inside its exhibit, and one of them just came right down to me and put its face right there in front of my face. And it was just, and again, I had no idea what to do, but I trusted in the keeper, who was in there with me, and just, you know, was there to interact, and that's it. I just really, and didn't seem to very much, not like a primate, did not seem to mind so much eye contact,
Wow.
which was very interesting. I was not expecting it, because I was darting my eyes kind of at it at first, and it just sat there with its face in front of mine.
Was it dark? Was it quite dark? Like, would it
It,
have had much vision in the light that you had?
yeah, it was not that. It was not. So this was supposed to be daytime or nighttime ish for them, but I think kind of duskish. So it wasn't, they had it, it wasn't completely dark. It wasn't like a nocturnal exhibit in that sense for the time that they were showing. And they immediately responded to that important antecedent stimuli of a keeper has walked in. And now, and this,
Amen.
yeah,
Amen. Right.
yeah.
Amen.
And this
Amen.
one, this, so there's the discriminative stimulus. So this keeper comes in, and now there's a
Yeah.
new person. And they,
Yeah.
I don't know the regularity of that, but they probably don't get to see many new people all that often. I would guess. So here's this strange guy, and I have no idea at the end of the day. And by the way, this was an important point that we had for talking about as well. Is uh, uh, perceived versus observed behavior. I
Oh,
have
yeah,
I
that's
have no idea what was going on with this II. I don't, why was it? Why did it suddenly come down and put its face almost right there? And I'm kind of doing this eye darting to not make direct eye contact, and it's just sitting there, and it's not there. As far as I know, it's not doing anything threatening. It's not. It wasn't. It wasn't. It just came down to get a close look as far as I could tell. And
yeah.
you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
I
It's really interesting. That point, I'm so glad you remembered what else we had to talk about. Um, and I'm just looking here in the chat, and you kind of explained it, or you kind of answered Lisa when she said, training species for the first time, trust your gut instinct. I think for my answer to that is, hear that? My answer to that is yes, but you have to have experience to have a gut instinct.
yeah,
It's that, because gut instinct is latent learning, it's that Freddie's coming back into my head kind of thing. And I think you did a really good explanation of that when you talked about, the walrus and which way do I go?
mhm,
Is this going to kill me and eat me? Do I need to look like I'm not a worthy candidate for dinner, or the other
right,
way? And I guess that helped me a lot, because I normally say to people, look, all animals pretty much, and this might still be right because it's a different it's a different tact. All animals, when I'm working with an individual for the first time, whether it's an individual species and it's all, or whether I've not worked with that species before, or even that individual, because that's again what we've got to get back at. Behavior is the study of one, but always there's more to learn and more to be cautious of when I don't know the species. Or when I say species, I also say I'm saying the breed, because
yeah,
if I haven't
yeah, yeah,
worked
yeah,
with a particular breed before, they're so varied. I'm always just relying on the fact that animals do orientate towards the point of reinforcement, but how they orientate with their body, how they, whether they come like this or whether they come like this, what
right,
what does my presence like, what reinforcement am I? Food or social interaction? Like, that's two very different kinds of reinforcement that I want to know about.
yeah,
Potential reinforcement. So I always, I've not met an animal that doesn't sort of that doesn't behave. How do I say this? I guess, oh God, Eddie, I'm going to say, I guess I can always get a pretty good idea of what the animal is feeling by that body language, or what that
right,
means to me,
right.
right? What the outcome is going to be. And therefore I can respond appropriately. But yeah, as I said, also, I'm not, if I don't trust that antecedent set up the keepers, then I'm going to stay where I know I'm safe. And I think, was it Lisa or Joe just mentioned down there something about where is it? Good idea to observe a dog to be trained with its owner at first session instead of going in and start training. And my answer to that is, oh my God, 100%. Just, I don't do many consults anymore because I just couldn't deal with the whole non-compliance and all of that kind of stuff. So I leave that to other people and I just play now. But every now and again I do one, and it's normally like an aggression case, and it's normally like aggressive chihuahua. I seem to have a name. But it's such an important point. My tact is to just go in there and interact very minimally with the dog. And I'm just going to say that give everybody this, because it took me a while to work this out, and maybe everybody else does it, but I know I was just slow on the uptake. But what I do is I take, especially if it's a smaller dog and especially if it's a fear aggressive thing, but I always now take myself in just a calico bag. It's the same calico bag all the time, and I've got a series of different toys that have my dog's smell on them, and I've got containers of maybe 3 or 4 different kinds of food that they can't get into, and I basically put it down, and I say to the person, the owner, they can do whatever they want with whatever they want in there. Like, I don't care if they rip this, if they do that, but I might tip it out, I might half tip it out. I want to give them information about me. And if it's a dog, they're going to get that information through olfaction predominantly. But also too, it's got my dog smell on it. So that generally should give me an idea to see. And I obviously don't know what's reacting to what, but sometimes it will help the dogs feel more comfortable because they're happy. My dogs are, blah, blah, blah. Other times it might make them a bit wary, but it gives them an opportunity to take in information and to perceive different stimuli. I'm there, smell of my dogs, different toys. So it gives me information about them, and it gives them information about me without any kind of pressure. Because you go into someone's house and they want to come in and sniff because they desperately want to get the information. Because and anxiety really, and I know that's a big old term, but it's very much based in the unknowing, right? Like, if you're fearful of something. So you can deal with that more than you can deal with anxiety of like, oh my God, what's going to happen now? And I've just found it to be a really good process to allow the interaction when they want to, but they don't, that sort of conflicting situation. So yeah, just take in that bag, dump it. And it's really interesting to watch that dog have something to focus on that gives them all this novel information, some at least, about this person, but no pressure on them whatsoever. And I found that since I've done that, they come around, and this might just be a coincidence, but they come around to investigating me much more quickly and investigating me in a comfortable way. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. Like I said, it's probably, everyone else is probably further down the track for me because I don't do that much consulting. But I also know that a lot of the times when you do consult, it just can feel like such a lonely world sometimes. Not so much now because there's opportunities to reach out and to talk to other people who are in that situation because of good old Facebook and stuff. But I definitely, that gives me such a great opportunity to sit back and just watch the dog. And it's just like the keeper, right? What are the keepers like? What's the owner like with this dog? Because we know that a lot of the time the owner is the biggest issue in the situation. And how do they react? How do they, I say to them up close, they can do anything with whatever these wants. There's nothing in there that's dangerous, blah, blah, blah. And there's some owners that just cannot let go of like, oh my God, I'm sorry. Oh my God, I'm sorry. Oh my God, you can't have that. You can't have that. Or do they just go, okay, well, she said that's fine. So that's fine. And that's a really big bit of information, because it's all information gathering, isn't it? You know, and not just meeting an animal, but every training session, every interaction is an information gathering session, because that's what training is, information gathering, so that you can manipulate consequences and antecedents so you can move behavior in the direction that you want. So that was a big one for me, realizing that, and then I don't know who sort of first explained it or made me aware of it, was that training process is that feedback loop between, and their behavior is changing your behavior just as much as your behavior, your reinforcement offering. And that is and round and round you go, round and round you go.
There's always I talk about that in a number of my presentations. There's always a relationship involved. I spend a lot of time studying human animal interactions, and I study them in zoos, especially animal visitor interactions as well, but also animal keeper interactions, and just that experience and those interactions. And the one thing I like to say about human animal interactions is I say, at the end of the day, everything we're doing with an animal is a human animal interaction. So there's always, there's behavior on both ends, and there's changes in behavior on both ends, and we have to be really attentive to that.
That's what I mean. Also, like when I talk about they've got PhDs in this, like they are there. You don't need to explain that to them, right?
Yeah.
They're so good.
The point you mentioned before about recording, and we're at this point in time now. We're in the future now.
Right.
Where we
no excuses.
We can all sit here and easily record all the things we do with animals. Now, all the interactions, the consults, the stuff we're doing, and I think that's incredibly important. I'm doing a workshop kind of seminar thing with Hannah Brannigan's 0 to CD, and we're doing a data collection workshop, and that's one of the things Hannah mentions quite a bit, which is wonderful to hear her talk about how much, hey, record what you're doing. Video record. And what I say, going hand in hand with that, because then there's the other component to the video record is, and now let's find a way to turn that into data. Let's find a way to measure that. And that is a really important component of the observation versus perception of behavior. Is that when we talk about perception of behavior, we can say, how do we feel about this response? How do we think, what do we think is going on with respect to the animal? What's our perception of that event, as opposed to how can we measure that? What have we observed directly? So how do we define these responses? How are we what are we doing to operationally define those things we are directly observing, and what is it that we're observing too? Because I think that's an important point. This is why
it is, and it's also important. And I think, oh God, this is where I'm preaching to the converted here, but I think this is where people can so easily get it wrong about when we say that, what it means. It doesn't mean that this beautiful animal in front of me isn't having some emotional response, or what I constitute as an emotional response, and all of that. And yes, I'm through their body language and what I understand as best as I can, that communicates to me, I'm going to change my behavior accordingly. If I've got a nervous dog, back and ears and all that, as to a forward dog. But that whole thing, and it just drives me insane. So I can't imagine how you feel about it when you get these people saying that, but there is this inner world, but there is this. Of course there is, and there's a history, like that's the other thing we forget, that, well, we don't forget, but there is a history that the animal brings to the table. That's why I start every sort of workshop that I do, or webinar thing where people maybe don't know me, to say, look, this is what my experience to this point, not to be impressive, but to impress upon you that I'm going to be biased. I can't help but think from this point, from this way, because for many, many years, I've worked with animals that I couldn't lure with a fish because I wouldn't have a hand. So it's so important to remember that We're not saying, we're not isolating just because we focus there on data and observable stimuli. We're not saying that, so therefore the other doesn't exist. Quite the contrary. Like, you know, people got, from my understanding, they got Skinner so wrong, you know, because he was so focused on the observable. From my reading and understanding and talking to people, it's like, no, he knew, he just was saying, but we can't, because as soon as we start to interpret what's going on there, it's a slippery slope, you know, it's a slippery slope that leads down to a Cesar Millan-esque kind of training. That
there's,
you know,
that's really, I was going to say, that's one thing that has always, it's always surprised me a bit. And we've seen some of that emerge even more recently too, where people have built up these straw man arguments where they say things like, well, behaviorism doesn't believe in emotions, or, you know, behavior analysis ignores emotions, it ignores the inner world, etc. You see that, and I just go, well, immediately what it tells me is something about the person who's saying that I go, you've never read Skinner, have you? Because you know, I think in the 20 books that Skinner published, you know, the inner world, what he would describe as covert behavior, so emotions, thoughts, feelings, all of this would make up you know, anywhere from about a quarter to, you know, the majority of the books that he wrote. So if you pick up About Behaviorism, you pick up Beyond Freedom and Dignity, you even in Science and Human Behavior, going back to 51, he was talking extensively about what we know, what we can know in terms of these covert responses, covert behavior. So he talked, it's incredible the amount of time. Now, all of that said, he has a particular interpretation of what that means. How do we define them? You know, how do we understand emotion? And I think this is one of the reasons why I like talking about perception versus observation, is because at the end of the day, and by the way, this has become a significant component of animal welfare, the animal welfare science, animal welfare research. This is talked about extensively now through the works of people like Malore, Alistair Lawrence, that they're talking about positive animal welfare, ways that we measure it. And a lot of that is defined through things like, um, you know, the affect of the animal. How are we understanding this? At the end of the day, what we have in front of us is observable behavior. And everything that you tell me about what you perceive to be the inner workings of the animal in front of you is determined through their observable behavior. As far as I know, you do. Oh, speaking of there's one. Oh, there's a little bark. So I was waiting to see Spaz. So
too cold. He's under somewhere. I've got Flazy. I've got Spaz
so
did have a great talk with you. I just should put him in front, and he'll let you know everything you need to know about the inner workings of, well, his mind.
But it's this is really, yeah, I know I'm losing my train. It's you see how easily this is the like ADHD in there in me right there is like immediate, like I just lose all academic ability to talk or describe anything just by the, you know, a dog showed up and it's all of a sudden I'm oh, there he is. There's Sparrow. Hello.
Piss off. What do you see here? Define, interpret the Chihuahua.
See, right, and what an excellent example too, in that everything that we're trying to understand about what's happening, that is important stuff about understanding the effective state of the animal. And by the way, and this comes up all the time, I know dog trainers and everyone involved at welfare at some level loves to talk about effective neuroscience and PANGSEP and all of this work, and I think it's great, but I think we need to remember the context under which it's stated, and not this. There are many leaps made about.
Can we book that in for the next session? Because I would
I,
love to go there with you.
if we can,
Seriously.
my only, I know so little about affective neuroscience. I know so little. I have so little experience with it. So I only point out I have one disclaimer that I make when I talk about Panksepp's work or affective neuroscience in general. As I say, that the way that they're determining affective states is very much driven by observation and empiricism. So I make that point clear, meaning it's directly tied to observable behavior. That is everything in there. There's not, so it's still relevant to how we talk about behavior. And
Sure.
our perception of behavior is all based on what we observe, what we are observing in terms of overt behavior. That's it. That's what we got.
That's what we got. That's what we got.
So we have to, and
do you hear that my boxer puppy's up now and annoying the chihuahuas? I love that dog with all my heart. He's driving me crazy. It's awesome. So yes, they want us to end too. Unfortunate but true. I can't believe that my brain came, isn't it? It's about motivation. Oh my God, there's a slippery slope. It's like, oh, Eddie, really, 8 o'clock Sunday morning. Oh God, okay, I'm sure I'll be fine. Hi, behavior. What?
I know, and then I have to throw in. I spend a bit of the beginning of it talking about how not all behavior is operant and what is going on in things as simple as target training and how it relates to auto shaping and sign tracking. That's a lovely wrench to throw in everyone's morning right off the bat.
Awesome.
Morning in Australia. It's late at night for most of Europe now. Late at night Saturday. Now it's Sunday morning for much of Europe, and it's it's afternoon evening for most of the U.S., which is always the trick of trying to schedule these things. Is how do we get it?
Hey, it separates the sheep from the goats. You know who is the total nerd when you say, when bloody Susan Friedman's LLA is on at 4 o'clock in the effing morning, and you see 20 Australians show up, I cheer. I go, oh my God, that is just phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal.
I'm not sure who's supposed to be. Wait, which the sheep from the goats? Which one is the more?
Hey, I don't know. Me neither. It's just a saying. You're not supposed to ask.
I know. I love sheep. I've worked with. I think. Boy, that can be taken out of context. I should stop saying things like I love sheep. But. No, I've worked with Jacob's the Jacob's sheep, Hampshire sheep. Those are the two. In fact, I've published with Hampshire and Jacob's
sheep. You have.
Four-horn sheep. Yeah. And they're great. That was some of the early research I did. Real early days of Orca. So out at UNT, early days of my graduate work, was doing some of the stuff with the sheep there, as well as the goats, La Mancha goats, the African pygmy goats. We didn't have any other. Those were the two breeds of goats, and there's the boxer puppy.
Eddie. So you'll be out here soon, and
we hope.
I am. Yep, we hope everybody's crossing everything and putting masks on so that we can get Eddie out here, so that the next time I'm down at Canine Ed Australia with Lisa Wright. No, right. Not the next time, because I'm down there this coming weekend. This time next week, we'll be down there missing you. And she just told me there's one audit spot left. So if anybody, this is just a callous opportunity to plug that. We have a great time. You want to know what the workshop's called that we do there?
What's that?
It's called When Arseholes Go Wrong. So an asshole is an animal that has agency, right? That you listen to and all of that kind of stuff. And it's when it just goes a little bit too out of hand and you need to learn how to pull it back. So that Sparrow is the sergeant of the asshole army, the captain. I can't remember, because he was the one that first taught me about assholes. And we have a great time. We pull apart behavior. It's just live demos, discussions, and it's just phenomenal. I love doing those. Here we are with an animal. Let's brainstorm. Let's help people see it in ABCs, and the 4-term contingency, now that I understand that. So not this weekend, but the next time, you've got to be there, man. You've got to be there. She has, I don't know if she still has sheep. She's got llamas. It'd be just great.
Oh, I'm very much looking forward to getting to see. Lisa's got wombats out there.
I know. Awesome.
So I'm very much looking forward to being out there around. We'll see once we finally get me over there how much quarantining I'm even going to have to do, because I may have to quarantine in Sydney and then in Adelaide. But we've got all fun kind of stuff like that too. And we just don't know. I mean, we hope by the end of the year.
It'll happen. It'll happen. Sooner or later, it'll happen. We're getting closer every day.
Yeah. And then, I will tell you, one of the things I secretly want to train in wombats is I think they would make great hip hop dancers with those big butts they have. So I think they should really get out there and do a little bit of dancing for some wombat hip hop video, little bubble butt.
Okay.
So I want to train a little bubble butt
Okay. So the next time we're together, you have to operationalize bubble butt.
You know what? You just have to listen to one song, Bubble Butt.
What?
That's the Bubble Butt song. You just listen to Bubble Butt. Literally, the lyrics are Bubble Butt.
Do you know how downhill this has gone?
I'm throwing it. You see how I'm saying all of this with a straight face as I'm talking about bubble butts and hip hop videos and training wombats for. I'm gonna. This is the weird dark humor that you'll get some of the time out of me too. The context of that, by the way, is that wombats actually have pretty solid rumps. Ridiculously, in fact. I can't even imagine. I guess people have to watch out to running into them with their cars.
That's really dangerous. Yeah. They've got a bony plate over their butt. Yeah, because that's don't you love an animal whose defense mechanism is its ass? Let's just call it a spade. Their main defense mechanism is their butt.
Is their bubble butt.
Yep, their bubble butt, and anything coming down a wombat warren if the wombat's in there, will be met with the wombat that turns quickly and does everything it can to get its bubble butt underneath the head of whatever it is, the fox. Dead.
Yeah.
Splattered.
Crush the skull. Cool. And they'll charge with their butts too. They'll charge.
Yeah, they charge. I've raised a couple of them. It is so cool to watch them learning this. And they're ferocious, like full on, even when they're this big. They'll charge at you, and at the last minute, ka-cha! Their bubble butt in your face.
Swing. I've seen them do the butt swing around too, which is hilarious. That they're running and then they just do it's like they try to slingshot their butt into somebody's face while a predator.
Yeah. I can't wait till you get out here even more now, because I can take you to a place where I've found wombat warrens that there's no wombat in them anymore. And sorry, but I've dug, I knew that they weren't inhabited, so I dug them out a little bit just to see. And I've found skulls, just crushed skull. Oh, sorry, Al. Just a crushed skull, halfway down. And it's like, Oh my God. Like they are they're welcome to Australia where everything is wrong. You know,
Right.
a defense mechanism is your bum, right? So anyway,
That's where every animal is absolutely fascinating to watch. That's the thing. I mean, ever since I was a small child, that's just the marsupials, the monotremes, everything. The reptiles there, the raptors, some of the owls,
God,
and uh, it's
God.
just and the citizens out there as well. So it's pretty it's pretty
We're
it's
pretty cool. We're pretty cool. We're pretty cool. Okay, let's
yeah.
go.
I think
Well
yeah,
still
I
here.
think we're
That's amazing.
yeah, I think we're getting
I think
to
we're
the
done.
end of our of our talk, our day. Is there any last things that we didn't talk that much about approximations and definitions, but that might be something
I've
we
got no brain left. I've got no
yeah,
brain
I think
left.
that's what we're leaving off at the end here. So
And
um
and and you know, bottom line is that we can do this again tomorrow. You know,
well,
who have you
no,
got lined up? Who have you got lined up next? Just tell me that. Tell us that before you
I
go.
don't know. So the last bits of this that I'll say, and I'll put it out there too. I did just recently, finally put out my Twitter and my Instagram for academic stuff, mostly kind of sort of academic. I don't know. There
Right.
might be some wombat bubble butts that show up in that. I'm fixated on that now. But otherwise, yeah, those are there. I will upload the video early next week. Are there any last thoughts? I mean, this has been really great. There was great chat too. We mostly spent a lot of time talking about behavior and the occasional cursing here and there. Not
It's
enough sparrow time.
it's just it's just such an like I can't I will never be able to be grateful enough for the universe or whatever the hell energy sent me in this direction, because it wasn't what I was supposed to do. And just the opportunities that we get to to learn, not only to learn and to understand, but to make life better and to make like the best side effect ever for me in this is that I learned to be a better person to me. Like I learned to use positive
Yeah.
reinforcement on me, and we hear this all the time. And it's that whole thing of, you know, like the people who I find are the best at this. I'm going to say this, screw it. No, are the best at this with other people, because they're the hardest animals
Yeah.
to interact with. And it's not about, so well, I guess it is about behavior modification and behavior change, but you don't get to train anything. When we think about the normal terms of training, you don't get to change behavior well and positively until you have that relationship. And you
Yeah.
know, the opportunities that I've had with some of those animals, whether they're, you know, fear dogs or whether they're eagles that have come in with who can't be released or whatever it happens to be, where you've had to say your behavior, I believe, I understand to be a direct replication of the way you feel at the moment and your need to protect yourself, for survival, for whatever that looks like. And so I'm just going to go in there and give you safety and give you safety and give you safety. And that is I get goosebumps when I think about how amazing a learning opportunity that has been for me, because it's just changed my world completely. Animals aside, it's changed my world completely. So you know,
Yeah.
that's just the icing on the cake for me. Icing on the cake.
Yeah, no, I think I mean the one thing I know, but one of the few things that I know about anything for that matter, because there's a lot of stuff I really don't know. This is an important point too, is for both trainers, for practitioners and scientists alike, Humility is an important component.
Yeah.
Absolutely integral to us learning. It's the only way we keep learning in this.
Yep. Yep.
So the humility is incredibly important. Um, and I try to remind myself of that. I mean, look, words are hard, by the way. Words are always hard. I lose track of what I'm saying in the middle of saying it. So because words are hard. So it's good to be humble about the things you're saying. It's a lot easier for me to just write things down, um, or use a practiced presentation or the like. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
the humility is an important component, and that's part of why I think these chats are important too. Is it helps bridge some of that gap to transfer this humility across from trainer to scientist and scientist to trainer, where everybody involved is going, oh yeah, that's a really important part of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
equation. So that's all I got. That's
Thanks, everyone. Thank
yeah,
you,
thanks
Eddie. Thank you
everybody.
so much. We'll look forward to the next one.
Yeah, thanks for showing up, and we'll have the video up soon. So
Thank you, Eddie. Bye.
bye.